This here needs no introduction. It is the BYD Seal, one of the most interesting electric sedans on sale here in Malaysia. It is also China's answer to the Tesla Model 3. So in this review video, I'm going to tell you straight up what I think is good and bad on the Seal and how it compares against the Tesla. Plus, since we've got both variants over here, the performance and the premium, I'll also tell you why I think I much prefer one over the other. All that and more in this review. Let's go. Now, when I said that the Seal is BYD's answer to the Tesla Model 3, I really mean it because this is very clearly targeted at the Tesla. The size is nearly identical between the two cars. They are the exact same kind of electric sedan. In terms of prices as well, the two are very close to each other. The EV price war has well and truly started here in Malaysia. The base Seal Premium starts from just under 180,000 ringgit. That is about 10,000 less than the base Tesla Model 3 short range. And then you've got the Seal Performance at just under 200,000 ringgit. That is 20,000 less than the Model 3 long range. Now I know the actual Tesla Model 3 Performance or Plaid or whatever it's going to be called is not out yet, but as it is right now, the Model 3 long range has a very similar sort of speed and price with the Seal Performance. So for now, I think it makes sense to pit the two head to head. That said though, the price difference between the BYD and the Tesla isn't actually that small in the real world, because with the Model 3, just to change the color from the base white is a cost option. Changing the wheels from the small 18s to the 19s costs a bit more as well, whereas with the BYD you get a free choice of colors and the base wheels are already these large 19s. And then there's also Tesla's frankly ridiculous non-refundable booking fee. That doesn't even factor into the final price of the car. So when Tesla says the car starts from 189, it actually starts from 190. So while on paper the price difference between the Tesla and the BYD is between 10 and 20,000 ringgit, but realistically once you factor in the extra cost options, the Tesla may be 30,000 ringgit more expensive. Now that's not a small difference now, is it? If you look beyond EVs, you can also see this as an alternative to the traditional premium sedans, such as the Mercedes-Benz C-Class and the BMW 3 Series. But then the price difference becomes properly ridiculous, because to even come close to the level of performance of the base Seal Premium, you would need the top-of-the-line BMW 330i. By then, the price difference is over 100,000 ringgit. If you're in the market for a sedan with a budget of 200 to 300,000 ringgit, would you get this at a much lower price or still go with the traditional brands? If it's me, I think I would consider the BYD. Do you agree with me on this though? Do let me know in the comments below. It also helps that I think the Seal is a properly good-looking sedan. I think it's modern, it's sporty, and it doesn't even lose out in any way in terms of road presence compared to the BMW 3 Series and the Mercedes-Benz C-Class. Next to the Tesla, I mean, come on, this looks way more interesting. The Model 3 is starting to look a bit plain, a bit too generic right now. This is far more interesting, especially with the nice LED light work up front under low light. What I don't like is BYD Malaysia's insistence on fitting this full wide number plate holder over the much narrower base plate. I think it looks really sloppy. And then there's also this very apparent color difference between the front bumper and the bonnet, which I hope is only visible on this one particular car. At the back, the BYD Seal is a very handsome looking sedan, even though the actual boot portion is very short, similar to the Tesla Model 3. But beyond that, the light illumination looks fantastic, and I much prefer the simpler, neater look of this BYD logo instead of having "Build Your Dreams" written in full like in the Atto 3 and the Dolphin. But having said that, I'm not a fan of the 3.8S badging on the Performance. I think that looks a bit tacky. I'm also not a big fan of the so-called fins under the doors, but I can very easily look past that. What I really don't like, however, are these door handles. This car does not have any kind of a proximity automatic lock or unlock function, so as you approach the car with the key in your pocket, the door handles sit flush against the bodywork. You have to press this physical button every single time instead of just having a touch sensor. Now, pardon the pun, this makes the car feel a touch old school. If you're looking for any visual differences between the two variants on the outside, well, there's practically none. Both variants get the same large 19-inch wheels with cross-drilled brakes, and the only difference between the two is the 3.8S badge on the Performance. And it's much the same story inside here as well. Both variants look and feel nearly identical. That is to say, very high quality, very high spec cabin right here. The one difference are these two buttons on my right. The Performance version gets these two electronic child lock buttons, and that's about it. Beyond that, they are all practically identical between the two. So the full 20,000 ringgit that you've paid extra for the Performance all goes into the drivetrain, which I'll talk about in a bit, of course. Both the cars looking exactly the same both on the outside and the inside is definitely a good thing if you're looking for the premium version, but it's not quite ideal if you're buying the more expensive version and you get the exact same looking car. But having said that, there really isn't anything much that you can add onto this car than what it already has. The one thing I can think of is electronic steering adjustment instead of manual here. Now, this is fitted on cars like the Tesla Model 3 and the Mercedes-Benz C-Class as well, so this car lacking that feature is a bit of a downgrade of sorts. But beyond that, this interior is every bit a match to both the Mercedes-Benz C-Class and the BMW 3 Series, both in terms of design and even build quality. The entire top half is all covered in nice soft touch leather. It even has nice contrast stitching at the top. There's plenty of Alcantara bits across the dashboard, and then you've got the leather on the seats and the steering as well. These are all genuine leather, no fake vegan leather over here. They feel absolutely fantastic. If there is a knock on the build quality, is this center portion over here. It's not so much the plastic quality, but more on the finishing. It just looks a little bit cheap, because beyond that, everything else is just nicely covered in soft leather or plastic. It feels right up there with the proper premium alternatives. Compared to the Tesla Model 3, I think this is the better cabin overall. For one, it is far more conventional compared to the Tesla's interior. The screen's about the same size, of course, but you still do get a few physical controls around the cabin. You still have a normal gear lever over here, so it's much easier to pick, drive or reverse instead of having to play around with the touchscreen. You still have the all-important signal stalk on the right instead of having to play around with buttons on the steering wheel. You still have proper controls for your lights, for your wipers. It feels much more like a normal proper car in here. But one thing I will have to mention on the signal stalk, however, is that it's on the right side of the steering wheel. If you're coming off a local car or a Japanese car, that will be fine for you. But if you're already used to a European car, say a Volkswagen, a Mercedes-Benz, a BMW, this will feel alien to you for at least a couple of days. Another major thing it has over the Tesla is a proper instrument cluster and a HUD up top. This is a much better solution compared to the Tesla, which has the speedometer right on the center screen over here. This makes far more sense, and I think it is safer as well. But on the other hand, BYD has also followed or copied, or whatever you want to call it, certain parts of the Tesla. For instance, a simple act of adjusting the aircon vents requires you to press the aircon button over here and then to drag and drop each one of the vents. This is absolutely silly. Can you imagine doing this when you're driving? I don't know who in the right mind thought this would be a good idea. The one thing that's good here is that all these electronic vents do add up this swing function, so you can just press that button and the aircon vents will automatically swing left and right, up and down, sort of bathe you in cool air as you drive along. That I like, but then again, I'm also completely fine with manual vents. This is just overcomplicating things. One more thing taken right off Tesla's playbook is the fitment of a full glass roof without any sunshade. I mean, you do get a sort of aftermarket looking flimsy cover that you can tack on this roof, but there's no way you can convince me that that is a better solution than just having a proper sunshade at the top. I mean, copying the best in the business, there's nothing wrong with that, but at least you have to pick and choose what you'd want to follow and what you want to do better. Other than that, unlike the Tesla, you do get a full support for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay with this car, and it fills up the full screen. It looks absolutely fantastic. The one thing that's not so good is that Apple CarPlay still requires a full wired connection, while Android Auto is fully wireless. One thing I don't like though is with CarPlay taking up the full screen, you do have to take a couple of steps to just change the aircon settings. Let me just show you right now. You have to swipe up from the bottom to let this control bar appear to begin with, and then click on the temperature, click on the fan, and then only you get to change the fan settings. There's just way too many button prompts for a simple act of changing the fan settings. But having said that, you can actually do the exact same thing, adjusting your temperature as well as your aircon levels through buttons on the steering wheel over here. That is pretty clever and a function that I would like to see in more cars moving forward. On the other hand, while this car may have a 12-speaker branded audio system from Dyne Audio, it just doesn't sound very good. The Tesla Model 3's brandless audio system sounds way better. But on the other hand, the Seal counters with a much more interactive ambient lighting system which can even follow the rhythm of your music. That looks fantastic. Other than that, you get the usual BYD niceties such as the super comfortable front seats with the front left having ISOFIX anchors. That's a nice touch. Beyond that, you've got a very wide and spacious footwell. It doesn't feel anywhere near as tight as a Mercedes-Benz C-Class, that is for sure. You've also got plenty of cubby holes. You've got twin cup holders in the middle here with one that you can press down to fit in taller cups. You've also got a lot more storage on the door cards. It's all nicely well put together and thought out. The one omission that I find a little bit odd is the missing integrated dash cam unit on top here. Now this feature is fitted on our local BYD Atto 3 but not on the flagship sedan. I just don't understand that though. The good thing is you can just buy that little camera from Shopee or Lazada or whatever for like 200 ringgit and it is a plug and play item. At the back here, as you can see, there's plenty of legroom, definitely more than the Tesla Model 3, the C-Class and the 3 Series. Although headroom is a tiny bit limited. For your reference, I am 167 centimeters tall, so if you are significantly taller than me, you may have to slouch down a little bit to get comfortable. The good news is the bench is excellent. It is super comfortable, it's shaped really well, very supportive, and for two, it's superb. The floor is still a little bit high, but nowhere near as bad as most EVs out there, and there's more than enough leg room and foot space for you to just slide your feet forward and feel far more comfortable. This car does come with a pair of rear aircon vents, which is expected, but it does not have an extra screen down there for your kids to watch movies on like in a Tesla. Beyond that, the build quality back here is as good as what you'd find in front, which is to say very nice soft touch materials everywhere and high quality leather all around. In terms of safety, this car is also outstanding because it does not have just 6 airbags but 9. The extras include a center airbag between the front 2 seats and individual rear side airbags. So in the car, you do feel like you are being protected with an extra layer of protection. That's a nice thing to know. Boot space is definitely not one of the Seal's strongest points. The rear boot only holds 400 litres, which is significantly smaller than what the Tesla Model 3 offers. And while this is the first BYD model to have a front trunk, it is only 50 litres, again smaller than what the Model 3 offers. So if so far you think that both variants look and feel exactly the same so far, you'll be glad to know there are much more major differences when it comes to driving. To start with, let's talk about the numbers. First, the premium version is rear-wheel drive, only with a single electric motor powering the rear wheels. That is rated at 313 PS, 360 Newton meters, and it gets from 0 to 100 in about 5.9 seconds. In ICE car world, that's about a similar kind of performance as a BMW 330i and a Mercedes-Benz C300. But out on the roads, the Seal definitely feels quicker. The immediate torque response, it beats the hell out of the 3 Series and the C-Class, that is for sure. Moving up to the Seal performance, and the numbers go absolutely nuts. The rear mounted motor stays exactly the same, but there is now a second electric motor powering the front wheels for an all-wheel drive setup. The front motors are now rated at 217 PS and 310 Newton meters of torque. You add the two numbers together, you get a total output of 530 PS and 670 Newton meters of torque. And it now gets from 0 to 100 in just 3.8 seconds. That's below 4 seconds. That is supercar territory. It is insanely quick, the Seal performance. This is the kind of speed that you won't even get in a true blue BMW M3 or a C63 AMG. This is just proper next level stuff. It doesn't matter whatever speed you're going at, you just plant your foot down and the car just shoots forward. Like on the outside, I'm sure it looks absolutely silly. You'll see that the car pitches up with the front leaning up and the rear squatting down. It's insane. It's crazy how quick this car is. And you know what? Considering the price of this car, just below 200,000 ringgit, you get the same amount of speed, perhaps even more than an M3, than a C63. That's easily around, 3-4 times as much. Yeah, this is crazy amount of value you get with this electric vehicle. But of course, that's only if you compare it against ICE cars. If you compare it against its closest rival, the Tesla Model 3, the differences are far less. But it's still in the favor of the BYD Seal. Both the Seal Premium and the Performance are quicker than their equivalent Tesla Model 3 variants. And with the BYD being cheaper, you definitely get more value with this car. But again, like I said, the differences are very, very small and only on paper. Out in the real world, however, I think the Tesla feels slightly quicker in terms of its immediate response and more aggressive acceleration. This BYD Seal, even on full throttle, it does jump like no other ICE car can, but there is a slight delay, and that initial response isn't quite as immediate, isn't quite as aggressive as in the Tesla. So against the clock, I'm sure the BYD is slightly quicker, but the initial push in the Tesla is more immediate, I'd say. But you know what? In any case, doesn't matter which car you choose, doesn't matter which variant you choose, all of these cars are way quicker than you would ever need a family sedan to be. These are all ridiculously quick cars. Strictly comparing the two BYD Seal variants, however, this performance is definitely much quicker compared to the Premium. But between the two, it is the Premium that I like much more. In terms of torque delivery, the performance is a tiny bit clunky. Sometimes you put your foot down, even though it's a complete straight road, you'll see that the ESP light is blinking and it is cutting down the power delivery. It is just a little bit too powerful for the suspension, the chassis that it is in right now. I really think the Premium fits the rest of the car much better. And even then, it's not a slow car by any means. It is still quicker than you'll ever need a car to be in Malaysia. And now let's move on to range, and again, more reasons to get the Premium over the Performance. Both variants get the exact same battery, the BYD Blade LFP 82.5 kWh pack. The Premium, by only having one electric motor, is clearly the more efficient of the two. Having driven the two cars around 500 kilometers back to back, I've averaged around just 16 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers in the Premium. You compare that against the full usable battery capacity, and that works out to around 520 kilometers of real world range for the Seal Premium. That is within 10% of the WLTP claim. Now that is again very important, because you should always look only at the WLTP range claim If it says anything else, NEDC, CLTC or whatever else, you should ignore those completely, especially here in Malaysia. Now BYD, for whatever reason, still insists on using NEDC range claims. So for the premium, it says it can go up to 650 kilometers on a single charge. That is categorically impossible unless you cruise around at 60 kilometers per hour and do full regen, drive very slowly and so on, but nobody is ever going to be doing that. With a normal driving style, I would say you can get 500 kilometers very easily with the Seal. If you drive more efficiently, you can go higher, perhaps closer to the 570 WLTP claim, but again, never the 650 kilometer NEDC claim. For the Seal Premium, the range is also quite a bit higher compared to the equivalent Tesla Model 3, which is the standard range or rear-wheel drive version. So that's a big win for the Seal. When it comes to the performance, however, the advantage drops down a little bit. Now, this being a dual motor all-wheel drive setup, the power consumption is significantly higher. Well, I wouldn't say it's that much higher, but the difference is definitely there. Driving the performance as normally as I can through my regular everyday routes, I've worked out an average consumption of around 17.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Against the exact same battery size, that is 470 kilometers on a single charge with my own driving style. Again, that is within 10% of the WLTP 520 kilometer range for this performance. So yeah, I would say for the Seal, you can just take the full WLTP claims minus off 10%, and that is about what you'd get in real world. Between the two, I would say that the penalty for the extra performance with this performance, yeah, I know the names are a little bit confusing, is, I would say, a price that is worth paying because you do get far more performance with this performance model. I should stop saying that, but yeah, that's what it's called. So the faster version is definitely, well, thirstier with a higher power consumption compared to the regular premium, but to most people that is going to be a price worth paying. I mean, the difference isn't really that big. You only lose out around 40-50 kilometers on a full charge at most. That should still be decent enough for most drivers. Now, comparing the Seal performance's range against the Tesla Model 3 is a little bit more complicated. The equivalent Tesla is the 3 long range, and that gets a slightly bigger battery, about the same as the Seal in fact, but it's a bit more efficient. So that has a WLTP claim of over 600 kilometers, about 100 kilometers more than this Seal over here. But another important fact that you should not ignore is that the Model 3 long range actually uses an NCA battery that should only be charged up to 80-85% on regular use, not to a full 100%, while the BYD LFP prides itself by being able to be charged to a full 100% on a regular basis with minimal impact in terms of battery degradation in the long range. So even if you do massive miles every single day, you can just go home, charge it up to 100% every single day and still not have to worry too much about the battery, you know, having much less capacity 5, 6, 7 years down the road. With the Model 3 long range, however, best practice is to only charge it up to 80-85% maximum on a regular basis. So even though its theoretical maximum range is higher, if you're only able to use 80% of that, that's about the same as this Seal performance maximum range. So yeah, I'd say they're about the same between the two. Now, of course, if you are planning to go on a full long distance drive, the Tesla will technically get you further. But then again, I don't think too many people who are looking to buy electric vehicles right now are thinking of doing many long distance trips with their EVs. Most of them would have a second, third car. I might be wrong on this, but do let me know if you think that the Seal performance is just as usable as a Tesla Model 3 long range in terms of its everyday real world range. Do let me know in the comments below. Next, let's talk about charging, and unfortunately Tesla takes a big advantage here over the BYD. For whatever reason, both the Seal variants here in Malaysia get the basic single-phase 7 kilowatt onboard charger. This is compared to the 3-phase 11 kilowatt chargers as standard on any Tesla really. That is really disappointing because the Seal is actually available with an optional 11 kilowatt onboard charger in Europe, but we are not getting that option here in Malaysia. I asked the BYD Malaysia product person and they said they figured most Malaysian houses only have a single phase power outlet, so they didn't think it would make that big of a difference to upgrade to the 11 kilowatt. Well, you know, of course there is the price cost difference as well. But you know what, I think that is a massive mistake on BYD's part. Having 11 kilowatts would make it far better, much quicker to charge this car even on an overnight charge. As it is, because it has a relatively large battery pack, 82.5 kilowatt hour, using a 7 kilowatt wall box at home, which can only deliver about 6.5 kilowatts on a consistent basis, you will take more than 10 hours to bring this car from 20 to 100% overnight. Not many of us have the luxury of having the car idle overnight for more than 10 hours. If the car did have the optional 11 kilowatt OBC, the same can be done in just about 6 hours. That is a big difference right there. But even if you think 10 hours overnight is not a big deal, there is further differences if you use public chargers. Like right here in Malaysia, there are quite a few 11 kilowatt AC chargers around. Now, if you think you are going to get the maximum 7 kilowatt charging speed with an 11 kilowatt charger with the BYD Seal, you would be completely wrong, because that 11 kilowatt charger runs on a 3-phase electrical setup. Plug that up to a BYD Seal and the Seal can only take up to 3.7, more realistically 3.5 kilowatts. You will need more than 2 hours to get 10% battery charge with this car. That is super slow. And of course, if you use one of those older public chargers that use time instead of kilowatt hours, you'll be paying more as well for much slower charging speed. Yeah, that is far from ideal. Moving on to DC charging, it's not looking great for the Seal either. Both variants have a maximum DC charging rate of 150 kilowatts, which is significantly quicker than the other BYD models we've seen before. Both the Atto 3 and the Dolphin max out at around 80-90 kilowatts only. This goes up to 150, so that is much quicker. But at the same time, the Tesla Model 3 does 170 kilowatts with a regular DC charger and up to 250 kilowatts with their own proprietary Tesla supercharger. So the difference is actually quite big if you compare the two. Plus, of course, the Teslas get access to their own supercharger network, while the BYD, well, a few BYD showrooms do have 1 or 2 DC chargers, but it's definitely less convenient in the grand scheme of things, of course. That disadvantage in terms of fast DC charging is very disappointing, especially with the fact that the BYD is claimed to be the most affordable 800 volt EV out there. Well, technically on paper it's around 600 volts, but it should still be quicker. It should still be much better than the 400 volt Tesla, but somehow the Tesla still manages to charge quicker than this one. That is a bit of a weird one for me. But enough of that, let's move on to ride and handling. I'll start with comfort first, because I think that is more important for a car like this BYD Seal. Now, in terms of comfort, there's actually a big difference between the two variants. The base Premium actually runs a slightly softer basic suspension, and around town, even on highways, it is the more comfortable of the two. The performance version, however, runs a slightly more advanced set of dampers. These are frequency selective dampers, which sound like they are adaptive, but they're actually not. These are full passive systems that naturally react to what roads it's on, that adjust itself to be softer or harder depending on what sort of road conditions you are driving on. Now, it sounds good in theory, and Mercedes-Benz have been using this technology for the past 10 years or so, but out in the real world, the difference is very minor. And because for the performance, the baseline is also stiffer as well, out in real world, it definitely feels less comfortable compared to the base premium version. And it's not like there's a big payback in terms of handling either. To drive even back to back, the two cars feel just about the same. It's just that the performance is stiffer. You don't really feel like it's more agile or more fun through the corners. You just feel it's harder, stiffer all over. So in terms of ride and handling, I much prefer the base Seal Premium over this performance. If it's me buying the BYD Seal, I definitely go for the Premium. It's more comfortable. It's slower for sure, but it's not that slow. It is still quick enough, and overall it is the much better package for me, at least. Moving on to the handling, it's fine if not great. The steering especially is very direct, but not the most communicative. It doesn't really feel like it wants to be driven fast. It doesn't want to be thrown into the corner. It can do it for sure, and it will do it rather solidly as well, but there's not much fun to be had doing so. I think the Tesla Model 3 is still a little bit more fun in this regard. I mean, that's not really a fun car to begin with, but it is slightly better, slightly more fun compared to the Seal, I'd say. The difference is not that huge, however. But overall, I would still like to praise the BYD engineers for making this car feel far more matured, far more well-engineered compared to the rest of the BYD range, at least the ones that I've driven so far, the Atto 3 and the Dolphin. Both of those models feel far too soft, far too focused in terms of comfort rather than handling, while the Seal has a very nice balance between the two. Just to give you a benchmark of sorts, the Seal right now feels about the same as a Mercedes-Benz C-Class from about half a generation ago in terms of ride and handling. It's not great, but it's still very good, and it should be well within your expectations. It does feel like a properly sorted European continental car right now, and not one of those overly softly sprung Chinese cars. Just a quick note on the brakes, there are significant differences between the two variants. Again, because the performance version has two electric motors, it is getting regen from two separate motors, so the regen is actually much stronger. As soon as you lift off the throttle, you can feel that the car is rather aggressively slowing down, much more so than the base Premium. Now, this will take some getting used to, but eventually you will get used to it, and it is one of the better regen brakes around. If anything, it is the Premium that I think doesn't have enough regen braking, I'd say. And as for the brakes themselves, they are fairly linear, has a bit of feel as well. It's decent. It's one of the better electric vehicle brakes out there. Next, let's talk about Refinement. BYD so far has had a bit of a mixed track record so far in Malaysia. The BYD Dolphin, I think, is very quiet for its price, for its size, while the Atto 3 could have a bit of improvement in terms of refinement. The Seal, however, I guess it falls rather in between those two benchmarks. Driving this car around town, I think it is remarkably quiet, but as soon as you hit highway speeds 90, 100, 110, there's not too much wind noise coming in through the cabin. There is a lot of tire roar that I'm sure you can hear right now. Of course, we are in Putrajaya where the roads are particularly coarse, but yeah, the same goes with the main highways in Malaysia as well. So if you're cruising around at 110, 120, this is what you will be hearing all the time. It is not as serene as an environment as an electric car should be. Now, this car is also running on pretty decent tires from Continental. In fact, it is on the actual brochure itself. It says Continental tire, both variants tick. I think that is hilarious. But even with the fitment of quality tires, a lot of tire roar is still coming into the cabin. Perhaps there's more to do in terms of cabin insulation or the wheel well and so on. The latest Tesla Model 3, I think, is a little bit quieter in this regard as well. One last thing to talk about before we finish off is in terms of its ADAS, Active Driver Assist systems. This car does have the full ADAS Level 2.0 semi-autonomous driving, but it's a pretty basic one, which is rather surprising. I mean, it does have ICC or Intelligent Cruise Control, where it's technically equivalent to Tesla's autopilot, but it only ever works on straight roads and very slight bends. Anything more and it will veer off, or it will ask you to take control again. It is nowhere near as good as Tesla's autopilot. is not as good as similar systems from BMW or Mercedes-Benz either. But then again, if you buy a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW in this price range, you won't get any form of ADAS, active cruise control, and so on. So yeah, I guess there's no point comparing this against that. Against the Tesla, however, yeah, there is a big downgrade in terms of ADAS or semi-autonomous driving features, which is quite disappointing really. But all said and done, while we are on the subject of safety, it has to be mentioned that the BYD Seal's more conventional interior with a proper instrument cluster in front and a HUD up there as well does make the driving experience feel safer and less dangerous compared to the Tesla. Remember, the Tesla doesn't have any of this stuff. It relies solely on the speedometer on the main center display screen. So when you're driving along, you'll have to constantly move or shift your focus from the road onto the center screen. That small lapse of focus, I think, could be dangerous in a few emergency situations. I'd say this, having a proper instrument cluster, HUD up top, does make the whole driving experience far more secure, safer as well. So that's my full review of the BYD Seal here in Malaysia. All in all, I think this is a great looking electric sedan with fantastic range, high-tech interior that is both fast and comfortable as well. Now, of course, compared to the Tesla Model 3, the Seal charges slower. Its ADAS system is nowhere near as good as Tesla's autopilot, and to drive, it doesn't quite feel as polished dynamically. But on the other hand, the BYD is cheaper to buy to begin with. Even before options, it has a longer range, a much easier to maintain LFP battery, and the interior, it's a much more conventional design. It asks for far less compromises and sacrifices from the driver. That's definitely a good thing. Put all that together, and if it's me myself choosing an electric sedan right now, I think I would go for the BYD Seal over the Tesla Model 3. But as for which variant of the Seal specifically, again, it's very easy. It has to be the base car, the premium, over the performance. To me, the Seal Premium is more than fast enough, has a much longer range obviously, and to drive, to sit in, it is also much more comfortable. And with the looks and equipment list being identical between the two, to me the choice becomes very simple. I'll go for the basic Seal Premium any day of the week. Do you agree with me on this or disagree? Do let me know in the comment section below. For now, thank you for watching and stay safe everyone.